the California storm door to possibly open. I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, January 26th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you have a question or comment, write it up down below. We'd be happy to reply. If you have not subscribed, hit the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. You'll get automatic notifications when the videos are posted if you ring the bell. And then finally, if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign on it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Our predicament, Evolution Moto. Evolution Moto twice, thank you. Tim Caston, Elliot Harris, Danny S. Gluck, Clay Goose, Sammy C., and our large contributor for the week, Bob Hart. Thank you all so much. It really helps things move along here. And with that, let's get to work. So first off, let's take a look at significant wave heights around the planet. We're starting up in the North Pacific. A pretty calm pattern has taken hold. Yes, there are 23 or 24 foot seas off of Japan, but they're all aimed off to the north. Another little small area of disturbed weather producing 20-foot seas up in the northmost Gulf of Alaska, but not offering a whole lot of hope. Down in the South Pacific, there is a gale with 28-foot seas aimed off to the northeast, so that should produce some swell for Chile and Peru, but not particularly any large size. It is off-season. Now, of course, the big thing that really stands out, this broad gale producing at least 40-plus foot seas. We'll go take a look at that in the detailed section here. Poised, if not impacting Europe as we speak. Significant swell event probably happening there, but notice it's all very close to the coast, and it's probably pretty much a windblown mess. South Atlantic, 22-foot seas off of South America here, but not really of any particular interest. And then over in the Indian Ocean, a gale with 32 or 3-foot seas here in the deep South Indian Ocean, providing some background swell hope for the future. Before we get into all that, let's go take a look at current conditions. We're going to look at the buoys starting up off the Pacific Northwest. Grays Harbor, buoy number 036. This is off the Columbia River there. And we're looking at all the energy that's hitting the buoy, all the way up from 33.3 second period. That'd be very strong swell energy, which there is nothing, all the way down to 5 second period, just pure unrideable wind chop. And then these numbers here are the height in feet of the energy in each of the period bands. You see 1/10 of a foot at 25 seconds. I mean, I don't even know that's real. But you get down here, you see, okay, the highest energy, 1.7 feet at 12.5 seconds. But you get the sense there's sort of this continuous flow of energy anywhere from about 18 seconds the whole way down to 5 second periods. So through all that, we try to tease out what the primary swell is. And we see 3 feet at 13.1 seconds from 290 degrees. That would make surf that's about 4 foot. It's about what it is up there. And then there's some secondary swell energy in there, 1.6 at 16.4 seconds from 287 degrees, making surf at about 2.6 feet. Now, these projected surf heights, they do not account for reefs and swell-enhancing bathymetry. The assumption is just a standard kind of beach break. If your local spot has great bathymetry, then the surf height could be up to double in feet size on the face of any of the waves. And then, of course, the chop height. This is just all the energy between 2 and 5 seconds. It gives you a sense of how clean or junky the surf is when it's half a foot. Don't use it as a literal half a foot, but use it more as an index. 0 to about 1.5 is really clean. In the 2 range to 2.5, you're starting to get some warble and bump. And once you're up into 3 feet, it's pretty much trashed. Let me go to Northern California. Point Reyes buoy off of course, Point Reyes, just north of the Golden Gate. Sort of the same profile, but there's a bit more wind swell in the mix here. in the 9-second period range. That from north winds that are blowing off of the Cape Mendocino area. Primary swell, 6.4 feet at 10 seconds from 329 degrees. So really pretty much shadowed in the San Francisco area. So theoretically, surf could be 6.4 feet, but it's not. It's chest high, shoulder high, something like that. Secondary swell doesn't even really matter. The chop height, 1.7 feet. That is probably overstated. Maybe up at Point Reyes, and by the time it wraps into San Francisco, it's not as high. And, you know, it's actually pretty clean right now. We go down to the Point Loma South buoy. This is off San Diego, buoy number 191. As one would expect, a much smaller profile because the Channel Islands block a lot of this real north-angled swell. Most of it at this point is just north wind swell. All the real ground swell that had been hitting for a month is pretty much over now. Anyway, primary swell, 1.2 feet at 14.1 seconds from 252 degrees. That'd be mixed surf at about 1.5 feet. And yeah, there's probably waist-high sets or so at top spots, but the rest of this really not a whole lot going on. Then finally, we go over to Hawaii, North Shore of Oahu, Waimea Bay buoy number 106. Again, even a small profile there, a little dribble of energy at 14.3 seconds, a bunch of wind swell, not even that much really, 1.2 feet at 8.3 seconds. Primary swell, 2.5 feet at 8.5 seconds from 345 degrees, so really north angled. And the surf height, 2 feet. Yeah, let's call it 2 foot Hawaiian. It's 3 feet, you know, waist to chest high, something like that at top spots. So what's been going on the past week? Well, there was this gale that pushed, we're back to Monday, January 20th. There was a gale that pushed off the Kuril Islands, pushed over the North Date line with, 25-foot seas right here, the highest seas over this entire domain here. So we kind of use the model, tease out the highest spot, and you can see the coordinates and winds and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, this was a week ago. Swell from that has already hit and passed Hawaii and California. That system faded out. Now, there was this other little system that flared up on Wednesday, Thursday, north of Hawaii. That swell, for the most part, is already gone too. Wind swells from it still hitting the Hawaiian Islands, but nothing particularly interesting. And then you get us to where we are right now with just this weak pattern up in the northern Gulf. There's residual wind swell from north winds that were blowing off of Cape Mendocino, and some sort of a low trying to organize off of Japan, but all the energy pushing up, aimed northwest at the Kuril Islands, and nothing back at our forecast area. Then looking to over the past week for the South Pacific, we'll just run right through this. We're on Monday, January 20th. Yes, a little gale did develop here off of South America, Chile, Patagonia, with seas up to 35 feet. That system and swell from it has already impacted the South American coast, and for the most part is gone. None of it is expected to reach up into California. Now, here on Sunday, there is this is really Saturday night, a little gale started forming. You see just the remnants of the Ross Ice Shelf. It is summer down in the southern hemi, so what normally is a solid sheet of ice here has melted away and covering much less area, giving any gale that forms down there much more aerial coverage to get traction on the ocean surface. So as of Sunday, as about this time, yes, there is still 28.6 foot seas, again, aimed at Peru and Chile, but probably I'd be really surprised if anything makes it up into California. For the North Atlantic, a week ago, a small gale here off the islands. Now, this was on Sunday the 19th. Whatever has been produced by that is long gone. I mean, most of this is the pattern still, the jet stream raging off the U.S. mainland, tracking northeast, north of even Ireland and the UK. But on Thursday and Friday, there were 42-foot seas that impacted Ireland directly. That event is past. And then on Saturday into Sunday, another system, and you saw it on the global overview, it was building off of, let's see here, Portugal, France, UK, Ireland, Let's see how high that got. It looks like about 43 feet, 44 feet as of right now, and stationary. Now, this is very close to land all around here. Unless you got an one would assume there's low pressure here. So maybe there's an offshore flow up this way, but there's really no seas there. All this is really starting about here and going south. So that would be the target for that swell. For the South Atlantic, we'll just run through this. It started on the 20th of January. Not a whole lot really has been happening as one would expect. It's the off season there. Summer in the South Atlantic. There we go. A little bit of something tried to organize with 1 foot seas, but not of any real interest. Then finally, the Indian Ocean actually has been doing pretty good, given the time of year. Some sort of tropical low fell south off of Western Australia. Little gale previously, 30 or 28 foot seas or so, but now we're already into Saturday. Here we go into Sunday, a gale with 32 foot seas. We got one more frame here. Yep, 32 foot seas, small in coverage, maybe good for background swell. It's all aimed off to the east and slightly to the northeast, so somewhat at Western Australia and Bali and the Mentawai Islands, that area, but not a whole lot of energy. So what is the forecast? We're going to do a deep dive here looking at the North Pacific region, our main forecast area, California and Hawaii. So we're starting by looking at Jetstream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, it helps direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south. You see it right there. So the jet emerges off of Japan, running from west to east. Little bit of a ridge here as it approaches the date line, then falls south, just Hawaii's down here. And what this helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft in that trough and also down at the ocean surface, and that is the hallmark of low pressure. Of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds get traction on the ocean surface, create seas. Those seas, as they eventually radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements get groomed out, exposing swell, and swell, when it hits your beach like Hawaii or California here, turns into surf. So we have a trough, and the jet stream is the fuel for all this. Now, it's not very, compared to the past month, the jet stream is pretty weak. You notice it's fragmented in pieces. It's still fully split north of Hawaii, with the northern branch going up into Alaska, the southern branch dipping south and then eventually pushing over Baja. Of note, there is a small backdoor trough here pushing off of California. Now, that trough isn't going to generate any surf, but it has created some low pressure, and I'm not sure that there's really any meaningful rainfall falling in Southern California, but at least there's clouds and there's higher humidity, which is probably better, at least in terms of trying to deal with fire mitigation there. All right, let's put this into motion, see what happens. As we get into Monday, the trough north of Hawaii gets really pinched off. That does nothing good for supporting gale formation. You need area to allow that counterclockwise circulation to evolve, and it really doesn't happen. And this split flow here, that supports high pressure for the most part off California, other than whatever's associated with its backdoor trough. And you see the backdoor trough, for the most part, getting ready to move inland on Monday, no longer affecting California. But also notice winds start building off Japan to 180, 190 knots, almost 200 knots on Tuesday. And it looks like a trough is trying to organize in this area, or is forecast to. Also notice the split point here off of California. It's been like locked north of Hawaii, which is roughly at, we'll say, 150 west, starts moving a lot closer to the coast. And this, thank goodness, suggests perhaps a pattern change. And you see that split almost collapsing completely as we get into Thursday, January 30th. The jet continuing solid off Japan over the date line. And then it's sort of a trough, but also see the split here too. So it's like the split moves up into the northern Gulf of Alaska, but the southern branch literally starts pushing into Cape Mendocino as we get into Friday and Saturday, and continues with winds pretty solid on Saturday at like 150 knots. Jets still consolidate off of Japan, almost pushing the whole way across the Pacific, other than this one ridge pushing off to the north, and we'd like to see that completely disappear, but we don't. We see instead this kind of, well, it wants to split here, it consolidates, it splits again, but at least some energy is pushing into California, and that suggests that the big split pattern, high pressure blocking the entire U.S. West Coast, is theoretically forecast coming to an end. All right, so let's go take a look down at the surface. This is surface level pressure, surface level winds. It is wind blowing on the ocean's surface that makes swell, not up in the jet stream. The jet stream is the fuel layer for generating gales down at the ocean's surface that then impart the energy to the ocean. So as expected, here is our gale off Japan. We have southeast winds at 35 to 40 knots, but they're all just targeting the Kuril Islands, nothing aimed back at Hawaii or the U.S. West Coast. There's also this little gale up here in the northwestern Gulf of Alaska with 40-knot winds aimed south. See how long they last. Well, you can see right there, in 12 hours, they're all but gone. This guy continues to produce some sort of fetch. Here are 40-knot winds aimed back somewhat at Hawaii into Monday, but then that quickly fades out. Now, another one of these little local low-pressure systems is forecast forming in the Gulf of Alaska, aiming north fetch down at the Hawaiian Islands. Here is the blocking high-pressure system off the U.S. West Coast. Still in effect, the gale literally retrogrades back to the west, targeting Hawaii with 40-knot winds, so there's some potential for some sort of surf there, and maybe even a little bit of sideband energy reaching into the U.S. West Coast. But I would say one should certainly temper your expectations on that. Now, another gale is forecast developing north of Hawaii as we get into Friday with, again, like 35, 40-knot winds and a lot closer proximity to Hawaii, and all the fetch aimed at Hawaii. Then a little bit trying to take aim at the U.S. West Coast on Saturday, the 1st of February, as the gale lifts north. But this pattern, there you go. You see actually high pressure gone. In fact, I want to go back and look just when was the last of the high pressure is actually as of about Wednesday, and then you see the first gale starting to encroach there and wiping it out. The second gale coming in on Saturday, as we were just noticing, and let's see where we go from there. And both of them continue to circulate, pushing likely moisture and some sort of change in pattern for sure for California, where water is desperately needed. And I also see a week out, low pressure building off the Kuril Islands with 45-knot winds, or 50-knot winds. That'd be storm status, but all aimed north up into Kamchatka and the Kuril Islands and offering nothing for our forecast area. So what are the effects of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, as we saw before, I got 20-foot seas up here, really not even aimed at anywhere. And over such a small area, no swell really resulting. The gale off Japan producing 20-some foot seas, but all aimed off to the northwest. So we put this into motion. I think the first low that's even kind of interesting is this one north of Hawaii on Wednesday, 29th of January, with 27.3 foot seas aimed south. That continues for a bit into Wednesday. You can see the swell front from it pushing south towards Hawaii. While that happens, literally another low starts developing. Seas not very big. I mean, the total coverage of seas here pretty minimal. 2022, maybe 24-foot seas aimed back at the Hawaiian Islands. There was low pressure. Let's examine this a little bit more. Pushing off Japan, but seas in the 25-foot range. Yeah, maybe background swell for Hawaii at best. It's still a pretty good long ways away. And that fades out. We're already into Sunday, a week out, and still no clear signs of any significant class swell. A little gale here over the North Dateline region producing 25-foot seas aimed south. That's good for maybe some 14-second period background swell for the Hawaiian Islands at best. Going to look at the South Pacific Ocean. Yes, we have that gale there. It's moving. It's already east of the Southern California swell window and fades. Really probably not offering a whole lot for anyone. Another gale organizes theoretically on Wednesday night, the 29th of January, with 30-foot seas. Now, this is south of California. Would we actually get a southern hemi swell in, well, it would be February by the time it arrives? Maybe possible. Given the complete lack of anything real in the forecast in the North Pacific, if this swell does this gale materializes and produces a swell, and the swell actually arrives, it might it'd be rideable and not masked by a bunch of other more north-angled swell. But we'll see. You literally can see the swell front pushing north up here along the coast of Chile and Peru. So for sure, surf there seems likely, but we're now a week out, and otherwise South Pacific pretty quiet. The North Atlantic, there's our storm that we saw with 43-foot seas. That continues circulating in some fashion into even Monday. You see swell impacting Portugal up in here into France, and certainly interest in the United Kingdom as well. And then that fades out. Another one right behind it producing 35-foot seas. This would be on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, almost impacting Portugal directly and getting in the bay here. That is pretty rare when one gets in there. So certainly potential for large surf, but probably pretty raw when it arrives. And then looking out beyond that, let's see a generalized stormy pattern. You can literally see probably where the Jetstream runs right up along this line with, well, there's 180 hours out. Don't know if I believe the model's out that far out, but it looks like potentially more activity for the North Atlantic longer term. South Atlantic, we'll put this into motion here. Monday, I mean, we're not expecting to see a whole lot here. Thursday, yes, something developing as it pushes into the Indian Ocean, but probably not doing a whole lot even for South Africa. And we're into Friday and Saturday. Let's see. Oh, there we go. There's actually a semi-real gale forecast, 34-foot seas. This would be on Sunday, a week from now. Do I believe it? I don't know. Oops, how high does that really get there? It got to 37 feet. If this were to occur, it would definitely, you can actually see previous swell there and more swell behind it. So maybe some hope for the South Atlantic. And the Indian Ocean, finally. Little gale fading out in the deep South Indian Ocean. Probably not doing a whole lot. We're already into Wednesday, Thursday. Another gale forecast pushing under Africa. We saw that on the previous chart. 33-foot seas. Now, this is a good long ways away from any targets over here, so whatever swell does result would probably be pretty small in size by the time it arrives. We're into Saturday now. Another little gale, but just, not a whole lot forecast, but that's what you'd expect for this time of year. It's actually more active than one would expect. Local wind forecast for California, so Southern California down here, Central California, Northern California here. This would be San Francisco there. It's Point Conception. Over here, this is the Hawaiian Islands. So as of, we'll just say Sunday morning, trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands, and offshore, here's that low pressure. Remember the backdoor trough, the jet moving out like that, creating this weak low pressure, a 1016 millibar low. That's very weak, but creating offshore winds here for most of the state, other than a southwesterly flow for Southern California and hopefully some rain. I didn't see a whole lot looking down there earlier. As we get into Monday, the low is inland and gone. High pressure 1032 millibar high, holding as it is with the split jet, the northern branch up here, the southern branch down here. What do we have for Hawaii? We have some sort of, look at this, like almost a north wind pattern at 10 to 15 knots. And generally probably near shore. The model showed north at 10, but it's probably going to be more light offshore, near shore for California. Tuesday, northwest flow takes over, but very light, 10 knots for California. Still high pressure in control. Low pressure setting up north of the islands. That's pushing in. Get that counterclockwise flow. You have high pressure out here. That produces a gradient. North winds, all targeting the Hawaiian Islands at like 10 knots. Wednesday, there's your low. Oops, there we go. 45 knot winds aim south at Hawaii. The high pressure hanging on for California on Wednesday. Northwest winds 10 knots, maybe 15 knots near Point Conception. Trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, the last of the high pressure. It already collapses off the Pacific Northwest. This is a very good sign if one can believe the models. Northwest winds 10 knots, but already switching south for the Cape Mendocino area. Hawaii has some sort of a southeasterly flow, but my guess is that would probably be short-lived, and there you go. Low pressure relative to Hawaii on Friday north of the islands. Winds out of the west or northwest, at least pretty light, 10 knots sort of thing. For California, southwest winds up north of the Golden Gate, and a weak, very weak northwesterly flow south of the Golden Gate. As you get into Saturday, trades trying to set up for the Hawaiian Islands, another one of these local low pressure systems. High pressure off of Southern California, but a pretty weak pressure pattern for the rest of the state, but low pressure all around it. We get into Sunday, then you see one low here, all look like they're bound for California. That is actually a good sign. Trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands and some sort of mixed, relatively light wind pattern for the California coast, but that will probably be changing. And then, speaking to the title of the video, will the storm door open for California? It certainly seems that that's going to be the case. If it is, we're going to see it here. But for right now, Sunday, here is the light scattered rain over Southern California, parts of Central California. Snow, this is more in Nevada. But there was some snow in the Sierra. So we get into Monday, the rain fades out. We're really here just looking for precip into California. High pressure still in control. Nary a drop to be seen until you get to Friday. And then all of a sudden, rain starts sliding its way into Cape Mendocino. And by Friday afternoon, late afternoon, almost down to Monterey Bay. Snow theoretically in the Sierra, and then pushing south with rain down to covering all of Monterey Bay. Now on Saturday, that all fades out, but then another fire hose starts setting up with rain starting, we'll say, from Monterey Bay northward, snow for the Sierra. This would be Saturday night, all day Sunday. All day Sunday, and pretty heavy snow in the Sierra. And that's as far as the model goes. But looking out even beyond a cheated wind, look at some of the other models. This is not all of it. It looks like there is a continued pattern behind. Again, if you believe the models. That said, 1038 millibar high up here in the Gulf of Alaska. Keep your eyes on that too, and we'll see what it does. The snow forecast dashboard for Palisades Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley. Now look at this, 61 or 2 inches. This morning's run of the model had over 100 inches. So there, this is a 10-day view too. So February 2nd, I think that's Sunday. So you get the idea. There is definitely potential. Finally, the ski resorts are dying for fresh snow, and it looks like there is some hope on the way. Let's go check some other resorts. Sugar Bowl, also North Lake Tahoe region, we'll say 58 inches. Kirkwood at about 48 inches. And Mammoth with about 11 to 12 inches. So let's go back to Palisades Tahoe. Let's take a look at snow levels. That is, where is the freeze line? So the blue is 28 degrees or less, very cold air. The white is between 28 and 32 degrees. The gray is sleet, 32 degrees to 35 degrees roughly, okay? And then the red, well above freezing temperatures. This is the base of Palisades Tahoe at 6,200 feet. This is the top of Granite Chief and the Palisades at about 9,000 feet. You can see as we get into, well, let's see, the 26th and the 27th, So this would be Monday into Tuesday. Freeze levels below the base, but then on the 28th, 29th, 30th, freeze levels up to about 10,500 feet, so well above the summit at Palisades, Tahoe. But as we get into the 31st, you see temperatures falling. The yellow here demarks where precipitation potential is, that little thin line. And by the time that happens, the freeze level is at 5,000 feet, falling to 4,000 feet, falling to 3,000 feet. So finally, it looks like a favorable pattern is setting up. All right, so let's zoom into a couple locations. Just look at in terms of what the surf looks like doing. Columbia River area, up there in North Oregon. Surf heights in the 3 to 4 foot range today, then slowly fading 2.5 feet in the 2 to 3 foot range. We'll say mainly through the work week. When you see these dropouts like that, that typically means a wind event. And there you go, 20 knot southwest winds. And then some sort of swell in the 7 foot range as we get into next weekend. And winds, though, pretty much looking all like they're onshore out of the 15 knot range. Swell heights for the work week, 1.5 feet at 12 seconds, 2 feet at 12 seconds, 2.5 feet at 11 seconds. You get the idea. Then a bunch of wind chop or a little bit of ground swell mixed in there. The model can't figure it out. And then by the weekend in the 6 to 7 feet at 10-second range. Go to Ocean Beach in the San Francisco area. Surf heights in the 1.5 to 2 foot range. 2.5 feet there maybe on Thursday. And then as we get into Saturday and Sunday, building into the we'll say 4 to 6 foot range, but with south winds at 25 knots. My guess is it's pretty much all wind swell. Let's go take a look here. Okay, swell heights, 2.5 feet at 9 seconds, 1.5 feet at 12 to 13 seconds sort of thing. And then as we get into next weekend, 5 to 6 feet at 10 seconds. So no real ground swell forecast. Going to San Diego, well, if it's small in Northern California, it's even going to be smaller there. 1 foot, 1 foot, 1.5 feet, even less, 0.3 of a foot. None of that looks particularly good. We'll just go looking 2 feet at 6 seconds, half a foot at 14 seconds, 2 feet at 5 to 6 seconds. I mean, just really nothing forecast. Hawaii theoretically doing better by virtue of the fact there's a whole series of gales forming north of the islands and all the fetches aim south right at them. So that is the target for the moment. Surf heights 5 feet as we get into Tuesday to maybe 7 to 8 feet on Wednesday, fading out. Look at this, south winds at 20 to 30 knots. And then coming up again as we get into the weekend, maybe 10 foot theoretically, and winds south at 4, 5, 8 knots sort of thing. So not too bad. Swell heights for Monday, 3 feet at 11 seconds. Tuesday, 5 feet at 10 seconds. So that's all wind swell coming out of the north. And then what do we have? More 4 to 5 feet at 11 seconds. Then we get into the weekend, a little bit better, 8 feet at 12 seconds, and then fading, holding in the 6 foot at about 11 second range. So not too bad for the North Shore. And going over to the Atlantic, the side that's at least receiving some sort of reasonable swell. Ireland area, 9 foot surf fading as we get into Tuesday. Not a whole lot happening until you get later in the work week. Maybe 12 feet on Saturday and maybe up to 18 feet on Saturday as those series of lows come close to the coast. But look at this, onshore winds at 37 knots, and pretty much it's hard to see any wind less than 10 knots over the entire duration. Just going to look at swell heights, 5 feet at 15 seconds. Well, that's not too bad at least. And then more of 7 feet at 16 seconds. So some real legitimate swell, 14 feet at 12 to 13 seconds. The focus seems to be shifting to the North Atlantic. And then Portugal, really the catcher's mitt for all the swell that's coming, 28 foot, 30, 33 feet. This is on Tuesday, and this is, just assuming a sandbar top, swell enhancing bathymetric breaks, where I'm talking. We'll probably do much better. And then another pulse with 33 feet. So we get into Thursday. Also, though, notice north winds at 30 knots. In here, north winds at 30 knots. And east winds at 22 knots. So the storm a little bit too close to the coast, but for fun, 19 feet at 15 seconds, 21 feet at 15 seconds, 22 feet at 14 to 15 seconds. No shortage of raw swell. Maybe some protective coves somewhere will do well. Right, so let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the two weather oscillations that affect the potential for surf and or rain or snow in the Pacific region the most? The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We'll start by talking about the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is our friend. It is like a low-pressure system. The inactive phase, not our friend, high pressure. And so the active and inactive phase rotate around the planet from west to east around the equator. The active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other. When the active phase starts moving into the West Pacific, it takes warm, moist air down at the ocean surface because it's a low pressure system, sucks it aloft up into the atmosphere. That translates into feeding energy into the jet stream, making the jet stream stronger. A stronger jet stream helps dig out troughs, helps produce storms, and then helps produce surf. The inactive phase does the exact opposite. It's a high pressure system, so it creates downward moving air, cuts off the flow of moist air aloft, and the jet stream gets weaker and splits and does strange things and doesn't support storm development. So we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. We're going to start by looking at data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung from west to east across the equator. This is the equator. This is the West Pacific here. That's New Guinea. This is the East Pacific. Now this is down roughly near the Galapagos Islands. We're just looking at the arrows. These are winds, 5-day average winds. If the active phase of the MJO is in the Pacific, it is low pressure. Trades are generated by high pressure. So if trade winds are weaker than normal, one can sort of assume the active phase of the MJO might be near. So we're looking at winds in the East Pacific. They're moderately strong out of the east, but not unusually strong. Over the Central Pacific, stronger, pretty strong. West Pacific, pretty strong. But it's not the actual mean wind speed that's matter. Are these winds stronger or weaker than normal for this time of year? We look at the anomalies. In the East Pacific, we see the arrow is actually coming out of the west, so they're weaker than normal here, suggesting maybe the active phase is here. And then kind of moderate, maybe a little bit stronger than normal over the Central Pacific, and definitely stronger than normal over the West Pacific. Next up, what is the forecast for the next 2 weeks? And we can also get a historical look here. This is the zonal wind anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. Blues are stronger than normal easterly anomalies. That would suggest the inactive phase of the MJO. Oranges are westerly anomalies. But now this is the whole planet on one chart. So let's get our scale on here a little bit so you can see what's going on. All right, 180. That is the date line, the international date line. So that's roughly in the Central Pacific. The far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right about there, okay? And it is that area more in the West Pacific that really influences the jet stream, because the jet stream flows from west to east over the maritime continent, then over the date line, and then under the United States. Notice westerly anomalies and strong, and they just started building in the past couple of days here over the maritime continent. The jet stream would run along here, pick up energy from this upward flowing motion from westerly anomalies, suggesting the inactive phase of the MJO, enhance the jet stream as it pushes across the Pacific, then theoretically would help to build storms and push it into California. But notice strong easterly anomalies on the date line. They've been here since the beginning of January. The good news is In another, about a week and a half, they're supposed to completely dissipate on the dateline with strong westerly anomalies here over the maritime continent. We've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. Back in December, we had all that big surf activity and a lot going on and a lot of rain. Well, if there was a window of opportunity for that to reoccur, this is, I'm thinking, the time frame when that would happen. This is per the GFS model. It only runs out 2 weeks, and of course I don't believe it even more than a week out. But some version of this has been on the charts for now at least a week, suggesting the odds are more favorable. And the best part about this is these easterly anomalies they've been forecast to hold now as of the 5th of February. They're forecast to almost dissipate, and you get weak westerly anomalies setting up here. This seems like a good opportunity for storm and surf production. Let's keep digging. Next up, outgoing long wave radiation. All that is fancy words for is there more clouds or less clouds than normal? Why does that matter? Active phase of the MJO, if it's like a low pressure system, it's taking warm, moist air, pushing it up in the upper atmosphere. It hits the cold air of the upper atmosphere, condenses, creates more clouds than normal. All right, so the reds and oranges are clear skies, high pressure. Think of that as the inactive phase. The blues, cloudier than normal skies. And let's get ourselves oriented. South America, Central America, 180, that's the dateline. EQ, it's the equator. And then this is the New Guinea, Maritime Continent, Bali, Mentawai Islands. So it looks like the active phase is here over the Maritime Continent, the inactive phase over the dateline currently. 5 days, and this is from a statistic model, not the GEFS model. 5 days from now, kind of the same pattern, though the active phase building while moving over the Maritime Continent. And then 10 days from now, active phase of the MJO in control of the West Pacific, inactive phase all but gone, and theoretically, 2 weeks from now, the storm door opens. Now that's the statistic model. The dynamic model, the GEFS model, this is kind of weird because 2 weeks out on the version we just saw, we saw westerly anomalies building over in this area. The westerly anomalies could still happen, but from a precipitation standpoint, doesn't seem as likely, at least according to this run of the model. See, so the 2-week forecast here, pretty dry. 2-week forecast, the statistic model, so much wetter. There is disagreement between the two models. Phase diagrams for the same two models. This is the statistic model here, the dynamic model here. How do you read this chart? Well, the MJ moves from west-east, from the Indian Ocean over the Maritime Continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, and then back to the Indian Ocean. It just continues in more or less in an ongoing cycle. The heavy dot is where the active phase of the MJO is, and that's what this chart does. It only tracks the active phase of the MJO, though one can assume the inactive phase is over here somewhere on the other side of the chart. 3 forecast members for the statistic model suggest the active phase 2 weeks from now, moving to the West Pacific, split between very weak and moderately weak. The GEFS model says more or less the same thing, but with the active phase just starting to move into the West Pacific. So the statistic model, a little bit more aggressive in the speed of the active phase, where the dynamic model suggests it moving slower. This is the statistic model showing areas favorable for precipitation. And this is a 40-day run. South America there, Central America, New Guinea, 0 is the equator, dateline roughly right there. Oranges and reds, dry air, inactive phase of the MJO. Greens, wet air, active phase. So you can clearly see inactive phase moving over the Atlantic, active phase moving over the Maritime Continent today. Active phase probably at its peak somewhere between about the 5th and 10th of February, but this runs about a week ahead of what actually happens down at the surface and even hangs out till the 20th of February, so that would theoretically be the 27th of February. All this suggests active phase over the Pacific in February. theoretically, if some weather event were going to happen, be it either surf or rain, this would be a sweet spot for that. And also notice as the active phase pushes south of California here, wherever the active phase is, remember it moves on the equator, but north and south of it, sort of like an axis running, a wall pushing across your chart, that would be where the potential for rainfall or weather events would be the strongest. So when the active phase is due south of California, that would be the peak of precipitation. Back up in here, it would be feeding the jet stream. It would be producing storms that would be pushing towards California. But then once it passes California or south of California, which would roughly be about here, then that pattern would change. You see the inactive phase as we get into later February and early March starting to take over. So February, at least according to this model and some of the others, looks like a very active month. Then we go look at the CFS model, and this goes out a month. So this is more of a longer term model where the GFS is short term. You get sort of, this chart now shows the actual MJO, the solid contour, the black contour. Again, this is the date line right here. The blues are easterly anomalies, the reds westerly anomalies. So the blues would be inactive phase of the MJO or the La Nina signal. They are basically one and the same. Notice it doesn't move. The MJO moves through the La Nina state, base state over the date line in the Pacific and modifies it or amplifies it one way or the other. So back here in November, the dotted contour inactive phase of the MJO marrying up with easterly anomalies, sort of hyper fueling the easterly anomalies. They fade a little bit. Then here comes the active phase of the MJO, and you notice here the easterly anomalies really fade right in here. So this time in like from Thanksgiving to about Christmas right here, this is when the storm door really opened, if you recall, and there was a lot of rain in California and snow and 100-foot waves into Northern California and all that sort of thing. And then here we go. Inactive phase started in January, the dotted contour, stronger easterly anomalies, and that's still where we are today. That's supposed to go for about another week, but notice here we go again. Active phase setting up, feeding westerly anomalies. Those westerly anomalies feed the jet stream as it moves over top of it and then gives it momentum downstream across the Pacific. And notice easterly anomalies much weaker as we get into about the end of the first week of February 8th, let's call it. Then after that, I think this is where the magic would start to happen. We got one more model. Then we have the CFS model going out 3 months. So this is not so much about the MJO in my mind. This is more about the El Nino La Nina status. All right, past performance is down here. The forecast is up here. They switched it in this version. Blues are easterly anomalies. The yellows, westerly anomalies. Dateline runs right up the middle here. No big surprise. Just the La Nina signal real evident here in the blues. La Nina probably peaking like literally as we speak now. The westerly anomalies, well, the far west Pacific starts at 125 east, so right here. Interesting part to see here, if that is the cutoff, a week from now, you see westerly anomalies starting to push into the far west Pacific, not really making it very far. And then you go really even further out as you get towards the end of March, and this easterly anomaly pattern completely crashes. This is a La Nina based. This is really, the easterly anomalies are La Nina generated, and as the inactive phase of the MJO goes over, the two waves or the two states sort of sync up. Inactive phase and easterly anomalies from La Nina, it supercharges La Nina. So that's where we are at the moment. Good news is it only lasts for about another week and a half, something like that. So let's overlay the MJO here. All right, sure enough, there's our inactive phase, the dotted contour, marrying up with the La Nina base state, hypercharging easterly anomalies. Then here's our active phase. Now the model, it's changing a little bit, but it shows this sort of like this perpetual weak active state persisting over the dateline from about a week and a half from now on for the next 3 months. Don't know if that's really believable, But you get the idea, and that what that does is start tamping down the La Nina easterly anomalies, starts building westerly anomalies. They start working their way across the Pacific and fill up the Pacific basin. Do I believe that? No. But it's a nice fantasy. Let's overlay the low pass filter here. All right. So now this sort of contradicts that a little bit. The solid contour, the low pressure bias, the El Nino signal, if it were over the date line. La Nina is things get flipped. You have the low pressure bias here over the maritime continent, Bali in that area, and this dotted contour, like a permanent high pressure system locked over the date line. Now, the sad thing about this is we now have 3 contours. Originally, this model said there would only be 1 contour. 3 contours, and a 4th forecast at the end of February. Don't know if I believe that. This just showed up like today, so I'm not buying that. Anyway, as you get into April, all this starts collapsing. No big surprise. The seasons also do a lot in driving all this, but this gives you a sense of here is your La Nina signal. Here is your El Nino, or your low pressure bias over the maritime continent, high pressure bias over the Pacific Ocean, and then the influence of the MJO over top of all that. So let's go into a little bit here with the La Nina pattern. We're going to start by looking at subsurface ocean temperatures. This is across the equator, going down 450 meters. Really, it's just the top 150 meters of the ocean surface that matter. These are actual temperatures, and these are anomalies. So warmer than normal temperatures are building seriously here in the West Pacific, making it to 160 west. Here is your La Nina cool pool. Here from basically a point just a little bit west of Hawaii up to about a point south of California. This is on the equator only. Warm pool in the east, warm pool in the west, cool water, not only on the surface, but down deep, sandwiched in between. Sea level anomaly data. This is used to feed that chart we just saw. This is the height of the ocean. Is it higher or lower than normal? You use a satellite like the JSON-2 satellite. It literally measures the ocean surface, every square inch of it, and then compares that to what is normal for this time of year, and you get a deviation. You take out the waves, the wind waves, the tides. Is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Why does that matter? Well, if the sea heights or the height of the ocean sphere is lower than normal, one can assume you have cold water at depth. And cold water would, if it contracts, and then that would make a divot on the ocean surface. Likewise, warm water depth expands, it displaces water up above it, you get a bump on the ocean surface. So here's the equator, here is Chile, Peru, Ecuador, there's the Galapagos, Central America, here's the equator right here, New Guinea there. So we see negative anomalies. These are not temperatures, these are centimeters below normal, 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters below normal. And this is one where one could assume the peak of the cool subsurface waters are. So right in here, you see, once you get over to the coast, almost normal, just a little bit below normal. You see a lot higher than normal sea heights over here, or sea surface heights, sphere heights, if you will. One can assume trades blowing hard here, scooping out water along with colder water, pushing everything off to the west, and then it all gets piled up here. The other thing is if you have a low pressure bias over here, you get westerly anomalies. They take all the warm water that's over here in the maritime continent, start squeezing it out through here, and it starts building up in this area as well. All you need is the low pressure bias that's right in here to start moving this way, and all of a sudden you could be into El Nino. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but, you know, you get the sense we're in La Nina with the cool pool, but it's not here all mashed up along Ecuador. It's in the center of the Pacific, and you have, at the same time, warm water building up in the West Pacific. So it's sort of like La Nina, but not completely. Then this picture tells you this same story, but it gives you the time component, going back a year to January of 2024. Here we are today. This is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is actual temperatures. The blues colder than normal waters. And this is be like Ecuador here. So you see there were pulses starting in January a year ago. One pulse of cold water here, another here, another here. These are like cold water Kelvin waves pushing across the Pacific. Here's our latest one, and it is fading. You see the buildup of warm water. This is subsurface, the upper 300 meters of the ocean. And you also see warm water building out to the date line a little bit beyond. You see that's also happened multiple times in the past. So this could be just a pause between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cold water pulses that define La Nina. This is probably just a pause. Maybe there's another one coming, maybe not. And maybe this will be the final pulse of La Nina. Sea surface temperatures, all right? South America, Central America, Australia, New Guinea, the equator right there, date line right there. Here is your Modoki La Nina cool pool. La Nina, sort of. Because if it were a real La Nina, all the cold water would be over here, but instead it's in the Central Pacific. Here's all your warm water here over the maritime continent. Normally it would be more like back here, almost in the Indian Ocean. Of note, you see this little thin cool stream starting to show up. That was not here even 2 days ago. So some sense of something is changing here. Maybe it's just the inactive phase of the MJO starting to push into the east, increasing trade winds here, and maybe the active phase building over here. Here's the sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. Sure enough, there you go. Cooler than normal waters developing here in the East Pacific. This had been a harbor for warm water for weeks now. Temperatures cooling a little bit, likely because trades are increasing in this area. But the cool pool was back here, or the trend was steady cooling here. Now it's working east. Again, that supports that thesis that it's probably just the inactive phase of the MJO moving off to the east. Eventually, we saw it in the models, it's going to end up in the Atlantic. And my guess is this will return to normal, if not warming again. Sea surface temperature trend this is in the Pacific, Equatorial Pacific, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, in the Nino 1.2 area. This is right there by Ecuador and the Galapagos Island. Temperatures trending down. The value, 707 thousandths of a degree below normal. It's not really a big deal. Normal is considered half a degree below to half a degree above, though you can see the trend has been down here. This is not the official El Nino monitoring region. Though I'm watching this, one of our viewers, he lives down in Ecuador. He was talking about how they had rolling power outages because all their energy down there is generated by hydroelectric dams, rain. And if you don't have rain, you don't have flow of water through the dams, and then you can't generate electricity. And it was pretty bad there in the December time frame, but what I've heard is now it's pretty good, maybe only a couple hours a day without power, and the rainfall has increased. This chart doesn't really reflect that, but on the surface temperatures, temperatures were certainly warmer off of Ecuador, so that supports more evaporation and precipitation. Now, looking at the Nino 3.4 index, this is the official El Nino monitoring region, the area on the equator from a point south of California out to about the date line. See temperatures today, they've fallen minus 1 degree and 461 thousandths of a degree. All right, so again, normal is half a degree above or below. Half to 1 degree is considered weak La Nina. 1 to 1.5 degrees is moderate La Nina. But we've only been down here for a month. And you got to be down here for like 5 months before you can, things change. It's very dynamic. You have to be down in this level for almost 5 months before you can officially declare like a full moderate La Nina. So as of right now, I'd say we're still in weak La Nina territory, Modoki La Nina. Sea surface temperatures adjusted for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region right down here. This week, for the week of January 15th, 0.6 of a degree below normal. And you can see we've been holding in that range since about the beginning of December. Before that, we weren't even in La Nina territory. So again, this, we're just in weak La Nina state. But ultimately, it is the atmosphere that determines, what's going on. The sea surface temperatures give us a hint. And all that we use that for is a predictor of whether it's going to be dry or wet. So we look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin roughly in the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower at Tahiti, the index goes negative. Well, the daily contribution, positive, 6.65, and it's been positive for, I think it's about 10 days in a row now. Prior to that, we were negative. That was probably the maybe the active phase of the MJO pushing across the Pacific. And looking over the past month, it's been as much negative as it has been positive. So there's a bit of noise in the data. We look at the 30-day average. Okay, that takes the noise out. Basically, dead zero. Yeah, set 0.74 below zero, but that's nothing. Where have we been? Well, we were at 11.3 around Christmas. We've been steadily falling since, suggesting either the active phase of the MJO or La Nina is just weakening. Then we go stretch it out more, a 90-day average, 5.38. That's not a whole lot. And, well, it was 7.31. I mean, at about 7 or 8, that's where I would start saying, oh, yeah, that means something. But as of right now, I'd say probably not. Pretty much weak La Nina conditions atmospherically. We look at that data graphed out, 30-day running SOI average. The Bureau of Meteorology in Australia says really neutral is +7 to -7. Here we are today, squarely in neutral territory. And this La Nina really never has, at least atmospherically, according to this index, done a whole lot. Though you and I know differently because we've been feeling the drought. We've also, there has been surf, but in terms of historical, this winter has been a complete dud, pretty low. And we knew that well in advance. I mean, we knew it was going to be a bad year, and it's living up to that, though it has had its moments. Sea surface temperature forecast from the CFS model in the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region. Well, here we are in January. Temperatures were 0.7 of a degree below normal. Forecast has them going down to 0.9 in right about early February, the first week in February. And then after that, we're back into rebound mode. We're back to neutral by April and officially speaking at about, 0.5 or 0.45 below normal. And then dead even as we get into the fall. That's very good news for next fall. So we suffer this winter, but after that, things looking much better. So for right now, from a surf perspective, well, you saw it, not a whole lot going on in the Pacific. The focus seems to be shifting to the North Atlantic, at least for right now. But the good news is high pressure off of California seems poised to collapse by about Thursday of this week. And after that, the storm door is to open. A series of weather events, not super strong ones, but sort of a fire hose of rain looks like it's going to focus. Now, not down on Southern California, unfortunately, but more in the, we'll call it Central California, Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area sort of thing, and taking aim in Tahoe region and down into maybe the Central Sierra, but not so strongly into Mammoth. Finally bringing much needed snow to the Sierra, and that therefore translates into rain locally and snow as it melts fills up the reservoir. So that is very good news. And then looking out longer term beyond that, it seems like this La Nina, not very strong, going to fade off pretty quick. And as we get into the middle of this year, we should be back in neutral territory, setting us up for, can you believe I'm even talking about it? Next winter, yes, it's going to be great. Well, we don't know that, but at least it seems like it's going to be better. So that's kind of it for this week. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down below and ring the bell. You get automatic notifications when the videos are posted. If you have comments or questions, I know it's pretty deep what we're going through here. Just write them up down below. If you have an opinion about what you think is going to happen, write it up. We'd be happy to respond or at least hear your thoughts. And of course, if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Use the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We'll do it again next week. unless I happen to make a side trip up to the mountains, maybe. But I'll post a message or something if we're not going to do a video next week. But let's plan on it for now. We'll do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks so much for watching.